And then the prince kissed the princess, and they lived happily ever after. Amira snapped the book shut with a look of deep professional disappointment. Personally, I think the prince should have gone to therapy first. Communication issues, but nobody asked me. She glanced at the boy in the bed, still, silent. Same as every day for 2 weeks. You agree, right? A pause. No? Of course not. You're asleep. Very convenient. Must be nice. She popped a cheese cracker into her mouth from the snack bag she was absolutely not supposed to have smuggled past the nurse's station and leaned closer to him like she was about to share classified information. Also, she whispered, your dad looks like the kind of man who has never once in his life eaten instant noodles from the cup. Just never. Not even in college. That's a tragic way to live. Excuse me? Amira did not jump. She turned around very slowly, cracker still in her cheek, to find Kang Tae-won, the most feared businessman in 3 countries, according to the news anchor Neka never turned off, standing in the doorway of his comatose son's private room, staring at the strange child sitting in his chair, eating his snacks, insulting his noodle history. Who? He said, in the voice of a man who had not been surprised by anything in a decade. Are you? Amira swallowed her cracker. The person keeping your son company, she said, while you keep leaving him alone. Kang Tae-won opened his mouth. Nothing came out. If you want to know how a sick 8-year-old girl ends up talking back to a billionaire in his own son's hospital room, and how she becomes the reason that boy ever opens his eyes again, stay with me. This one's going to wreck you in the best way. Let's get into it. Nobody had invited Amira into room 312. That was sort of the point. Room 298, where she actually belonged, had a heart monitor that beeped like an impatient microwave, a window facing a parking garage, and a roommate named Deja who slept through everything, including Amira's jokes, which Amira considered a personal insult. Room 312 had fresh flowers, a television nobody watched, a leather chair that cost more than a Neka's car, and a boy who never woke up. Amira had found it by accident on a bathroom break gone wrong, and she'd known, instantly, the way she knew things, that it was the loneliest room in the hospital. Rich or not, that boy was by himself more than anyone she'd ever met, so she'd started visiting. Every day, 4:15, right when the nurses changed shifts, and nobody was watching the hallway too closely. She brought the same storybook every time, dragging her IV pole behind her like a reluctant pet. Okay, she told him, on what she'd started counting as day 11, we are not skipping to the end. That's cheating. Cheating is for people with no patience, and no patience is not a personality, it's a character flaw, and frankly, I expected more from you. He did not answer. He never did. But Amira talked to him anyway, because, as she'd explained to absolutely nobody, since nobody had asked, a person who can't answer is still a person, and a person alone in a fancy room with nobody talking to them was still alone, expensive flowers or not. You know, she said, flipping to the bent page, if you keep sleeping this long, people are gonna start thinking you're lazy. I'm just saying. I'd hate for that to be your reputation. Oh, Junho? Real lazy kid? Slept for months? Never even tried. She'd learned his name off the little whiteboard by the door. That's rough. I'm trying to protect you here. She read for a while. She did the voices. She stopped constantly to argue with the plot. This fox needs a hobby, she informed him around page 9. Third scheme in 20 pages. At some point, the rabbit's gonna get smart, and then what's this fox gonna do with his whole life? Think about that. She'd started telling him things too. Real things. The kind of things she didn't say to the nice doctor or the psychologist with the puppets or even a NECA, because a boy who can't respond can't get that look on his face, the soft, sorry, breaking look that Amira had banned from her presence months ago. "I have a bad heart," she told him plainly, like she was reporting the weather. "Actual bad, not sad song bad. There's a hole that's not supposed to be there, and a valve that doesn't close right, and a bunch of words the doctors say real fast, like I won't understand 'em. I understand 'em. I'm 8, not stupid." She shrugged the way kids shrug when a feeling gets too big, and it's easier to just let it slide off. "Everybody looks at me different once they know, like I'm gonna shatter if they laugh too loud. It's annoying." She glanced at him. "You don't do that. Advantage of being asleep, I guess." That was the day the door opened behind her, and she didn't hear it, too busy explaining why the fox's whole life philosophy was flawed, until a voice said, sharp as a blade, "What are you doing in here?" Amira closed the book, unhurried, and turned around to see a tall man in a suit that probably cost more than the hospital wing, staring at her like she was a security breach. "Reading," she said. "You want the short version or the long version? 'Cause honestly, the fox's decisions deserve the long version. You should not be in this room." He crossed to the bed fast, checking the machines, checking his son, like she might have broken something just by existing near him. "How did you get past security?" "I'm very sneaky," Amira said, with the modest pride of someone reporting a genuine skill. "Also, shift change. Y'all should fix that. Real security problem. I could have been a spy. This is a private room." "I know. That's why he's so lonely. Nobody comes to private rooms. Everybody's scared of private rooms." She hopped down off the chair, tucking the book under her arm. "Nurses check the machines and leave. That's not the same as somebody being with you. I know the difference. I've had both." Taewon looked at her properly for the first time, the port taped under her collarbone, the pallor she couldn't quite joke her way out of, the pole she dragged like it weighed nothing. "Why do you come here?" he asked, quieter. "Because he looked lonely," Amira said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "That's the whole reason. I don't know your name till right now. I just didn't want him by himself." On the bed, Junho's fingers twitched against the sheet. Neither of them had been looking at him, Taewon watching Amira mid-sentence, until the small movement caught the corner of his eye, and Taewon's whole body went rigid. "Junho?" The boy's hand moved again, slower this time, deliberate, like something rising up through deep water. "Junho." Taewon was at the bedside in one step, all his sharp composure gone, his voice cracking clean in half. "Can you? Appa's here. I'm right here." The boy's eyelids fluttered, opened, closed, opened again, searching the ceiling, like he didn't recognize the shape of his own room. Amira didn't move. She just watched, book still clutched to her chest, the way she watched everything, carefully, like she was taking notes for later. "Come on," Taewon said, and it wasn't clear if he meant it for his son, or for God, or for whatever had kept this moment locked away for 3 months. "Come on! Come on!" Junho's eyes finally settled. Not on his father, not on the machines or the flowers or the ceiling, on Amira. His lips moved, dry, cracked, no real sound behind it yet, but she understood the shape of it anyway, because she'd spent every one of the last however many minutes explaining herself directly to his face, like he could talk back the whole time. "You!" Amira uncrossed her arms just long enough to look down at the boy she'd nicknamed Sleeping Beauty for 2 whole weeks, now blinking up at her like she'd stepped straight out of a dream he couldn't place. "Finally," she said, "you can see me now. Congratulations. Took you long enough." The monitor's alarm cut through the room, and a nurse burst in, then another, everyone shouting for the doctor, for charts, for Taewon. "To step back, please, sir, just for a moment." The room filling fast with noise and motion, and months of tension breaking all at once. A doctor pushed past her, and a nurse's hand landed firm on her shoulder to steer her out of the way. But Taewon, even with his son's hand gripped tight in his own, even with 3 months of terror finally breaking loose in his chest, still found 1 second to shoot Amira a look. She didn't flinch. She just smiled, small and satisfied, like she'd known this would happen all along. It took 3 days before Junho was strong enough to really talk, and the first thing he said to Amira, once the tubes were down to just 1 and his voice worked again, was, "Were you actually there, or did I dream you?" Amira, sprawled sideways in the leather chair with a bag of chips she was absolutely not supposed to have, paused mid-crunch. "I was there, every day, for 2 weeks. You're welcome, by the way. I thought you were a dream." He said it slowly, like every word still cost him something. "I remember a voice. I remember a fox, maybe? Someone arguing with a fox? That was me reading, not arguing. There's a difference. And I remember not being alone." He looked at her carefully, like he was trying to match a face to something blurry. "That's it, though. I don't remember what you said, just that someone was there." Amira sat very still for a second. "Wait, you don't remember any of it? Specifically? Should I?" "No." She said it too fast, then covered with a shrug. "I mean, no, obviously not. You were in a coma, Junho. That's how comas work. Very fuzzy, very forgettable. 10 out of 10, no notes." Internally, she was doing the math on everything she'd said to him over 2 weeks. The noodle comment, the eyebrows, several detailed opinions about his room being expensive but sad, and deciding, with great relief, that all of it could stay buried exactly where it was. "Why do you look nervous?" Junho asked. "I don't look nervous. I look tired. There's a difference. I've had a long day of doing nothing in a hospital bed. Very exhausting work." She grabbed the storybook off the side table and shoved it at him before he could ask anything else. "Anyway, you owe me 2 weeks of listening without arguing back, so now you get to hear the actual ending, and you're not allowed to complain about it." That was how it started. Within a week, Amira had appointed herself Junho's official recovery consultant, a job nobody had offered her and one she performed with total confidence. "You have to walk today," she informed him, standing at the end of his bed with her arms crossed. "The nurse said so. I heard her. I walked yesterday. To the bathroom doesn't count. That's basic human function. I need you doing laps. You don't even work here. I don't need to work here to have opinions. Junho, that's not how opinions work." He walked, slowly, one hand on the IV pole, Amira narrating the whole thing like a sports announcer. "And he's up, folks. The crowd goes wild. Will he make it to the window? Place your bets." Until a nurse finally shooed her back to her own room, laughing despite herself. They argued about everything. Amira decided this was part of being friends, same as reading to him had been part of not letting him be alone. "Penguins are the best animal," Junho said one afternoon, flipping through a nature magazine Neka had left in the shared lounge. "Penguins look like tiny businessmen having the worst day of their lives," Amira said. "I don't trust an animal that dresses like it's going to a funeral every day. Elephants forget nothing. That's not impressive. That's exhausting." Imagine remembering every bad thing that ever happened to you, forever. Elephants remember their families. Junho. They remember where the water is. That's not exhausting. That's loyalty. Of all the animals, you pick the one that looks like a sad little man in a suit. Of all the animals, you pick the one that never forgets anything. Yeah, well. Amira shrugged, something serious flickering behind her eyes, before she buried it under a grin. Somebody's gotta remember stuff. Might as well be something big and gray that can't get embarrassed about it. Junho didn't push. He just filed it away, the way he was starting to file away a lot of things about her. How fast she deflected when a conversation got too close to something real. How she always circled back to jokes like they were a life raft. They talked about food. Amira described jollof rice in such loving detail, Junho got genuinely hungry listening, and she made him promise, formally, hand on heart, that he'd try it someday. They talked about school. He'd had private tutors his whole life and had never once had a real friend before her, a fact he said so plainly it made Amira go quiet for a second before she covered it with a joke about tutors probably not letting him throw paper airplanes either. They talked about what they wanted to do once they got out. Junho wanted to actually see the ocean, not from a hotel balcony. Amira wanted to ride a roller coaster that went upside down, a detail she left out of any conversation involving her doctors. Taewon watched all of this from the doorway, more often than either child realized. He had not seen his son laugh in longer than 3 months. Longer, if he was honest, than that. Junho had always been quiet, careful, the product of a house with too much money and not enough noise. Taewon had built an empire and somehow forgotten to build a childhood to go with it. And this small, loud, relentlessly unimpressed girl had cracked something open in his son that a dozen specialists and his entire fortune had not. He asked for seconds at dinner tonight, Taewon told his assistant on the phone one evening, quiet with something dangerously close to wonder. He hasn't asked for seconds since I don't remember when, but he noticed other things too. He noticed Amira sometimes arrived at 4:15 slower than usual, dragging the IV pole like it had gotten heavier overnight. He noticed she'd press a hand flat against her chest, mid-sentence, just for a second, then keep talking like nothing had happened. He noticed a woman, tired-eyed, sharp-jawed, clearly her older sister, who came to collect her some evenings, wearing the face of someone permanently bracing for bad news. "You should rest more," he said to Amira once, when Junho had dozed off mid-conversation and it was just the two of them in the hallway. "I rest plenty. You look tired. I look fabulous, actually, but okay." She was already walking away. "Gotta go. Very important appointment with a blood pressure cuff. Glamorous life I lead." He let her go, but the worry stayed with him the rest of the night. Strange, unfamiliar, worry for a child that wasn't his, that he'd known barely 2 weeks, that had somehow become the loudest and most necessary sound in his son's recovery. It was Junho who found out first. He'd wandered, slowly, proudly, on his own 2 feet, a milestone he'd been bragging about all morning, down to the lounge looking for her, and found her sister there instead, sitting with her face in her hands, a folder open on the table. He hadn't meant to read anything, but he was a careful boy, used to rooms full of adults who assumed he wasn't paying attention, and the words were right there, before he could look away. Congenital heart defect, transplant list, priority status. Neka looked up fast and closed the folder, but it was too late. "You're Junho," she said instead, wiping her face, forcing something steady into her voice. "Amira talks about you non-stop. It's honestly annoying." "Is she okay?" he asked, because he already knew the shape of the answer, and needed to hear it said anyway. Neka looked at him for a long moment, this careful, quiet boy who'd been asleep for 3 months and had woken up, apparently, into a friendship that mattered enough to ask this before he asked anything else. "No," she said finally, quiet, honest in a way adults rarely were with him. "Not really. Junho didn't tell Amira what he'd read. He tried to act normal. He was bad at it." "You're staring at me weird," Amira said the next afternoon, halfway through a story about a kid on her floor who'd tried to trade his jello for her pudding. "You've been staring for like 10 minutes. Blink." He blinked. Didn't help. "Are you dying?" Amira went still. "Wow. Okay. No warm-up. Just bam. Rude." "Are you?" "I have a bad heart. We've talked about this. You didn't say transplant." His voice cracked, and he hated it. "I saw papers. In the lounge. With your sister." Amira looked at him for a second, all the jokes gone out of her face. "That wasn't supposed to happen. Why didn't you tell me?" "'Cause then, it's the only thing we talk about." She pulled her knees up, smaller than he'd ever seen her. Everybody gets the sad face. The careful voice. "Then I'm not Amira anymore. I'm just the sick girl, and I've hated that since I was 5, so no thank you." "So you just don't tell people?" "I tell people what they need, to not treat me weird. You needed to know I like elephants and think foxes need therapy. That's the important stuff. It's not the same." He was up now, one hand braced on the rail, unsteady. "You knew, this whole time, and you never acted like it. You made me promise to try jollof rice. You said we'd ride a roller coaster together someday. How do you just do that?" Amira picked at a thread on the blanket. "'Cause crying about it doesn't fix it," she said. "It just makes my face puffy, and then Neka sees, and she starts crying, and then we're both ugly crying over nothing, and I'd rather save the crying for something that actually needs it. Like a sad movie. Or if my elephant book gets water damaged, Amira, I'm serious, priorities." But her voice wobbled on the last word, just slightly, and she looked away fast, out the window, like the parking garage was suddenly very interesting. He didn't push. He just sat down on the edge of her bed, closer than he usually let himself, and she didn't leave until Aneka came to get her. He went straight to his father. "You have to help her." Taewon looked up from his laptop, startled by the force in his son's voice. "Help who?" "Amira. She needs a heart, and the list is too slow, and you fixed everything for me. You have hospitals with your name on them, so fix this too." Junho was breathing fast, the fear finally spilling out after a whole day of holding it in. "Please." Something in Taewon's chest went cold, then resolved. "I'll make calls tonight." He meant it. By morning, he'd already reached 3 transplant centers and a foundation he funded for pediatric cardiac cases. He showed up at the hospital with a folder full of options most families never got to hear about. And Neka didn't touch it. "No, you haven't even looked. I don't need to. I know what this is." Arms crossed, voice low. "This is you deciding my sister's a project, something you solve like everything else. I'm trying to save her life. You're trying to feel like you fixed something." It landed harder than Aneka meant it to, because part of it was true. We've been on that list a year, fighting for every scrap of priority with no name that opens doors, and now you show up and it's just calls? Easy? Do you know what that does to somebody who's been drowning for a year? I'm not trying to embarrass you. You don't have to try. Her voice shook. She's not a headline. Billionaire saves sick girl. She's the only family I've got left. She's not your redemption story. Taewon stood there, folder in hand, and had no answer for that. He didn't take the offer back, but he didn't push again that week. Amira's heart didn't wait for either of them to figure it out. It happened on a Tuesday that started ordinary. Amira cross-legged on Junho's bed, deep in an argument about whether sharks were smarter than dolphins, and turned, inside an hour, into alarms and a crash cart and Anneka's voice cracking down a hallway full of running nurses. Junho got pulled out before he understood what was happening. He stood frozen in his hospital gown, watching through the window as doctors moved around her bed too fast. Nothing like the calm check-ins he was used to. Taewon found him there, still as a photograph. "What's happening to her?" Junho whispered. Down the hall, a doctor stepped out to talk to Annika, voice pitched low, the way it gets when the news is bad. "Her heart's failing faster than we projected," he said. "If we don't find a donor soon, days, not weeks, I can't promise how much time she has." Neka's knees buckled. Taewon caught her arm before she went down, and Junho, the boy who'd once needed someone else to give him a reason to open his eyes, stood in that hallway and understood, all at once, that he was about to lose the only person who'd ever given him one. Amira survived the Tuesday. Barely, everyone kept saying, like the word made it better. Amira didn't come to 4:15 anymore, so on the third day, Junho pushed open her door instead. "You're supposed to be resting," she said, one eye open. "You're supposed to be somewhere else. Yet here, we both are." He held up a book. "I brought you this. If that's another fox, I won't take it. Elephants." Amira squinted at the cover. "Migration Patterns of the African Elephant." Junho, "That's a textbook. You like elephants. Liking an animal isn't the same as wanting its census report." But she made room on the blanket anyway. He read badly, flat where her voice used to climb, stumbling on the scientific names. "You sound like you're reading my hospital bill." "I'm trying. Try harder. This is embarrassing for both of us." She was smiling by page 3. Tired, but real. He came every day. A puzzle. 6 pieces in. Declared the worst puzzle in human history. Abandoned. A joke about a penguin. Delivered so badly a nurse came running at how hard Amira laughed. "You're not funny," she told him. "You're funny by accident." "I'll take it." But some days she couldn't finish a sentence without stopping to breathe, and she'd still force the joke out anyway, every time. "You don't have to be funny right now," he said, after the third one in a row fell flat. "I'm fine. You said that yesterday. 'Cause it's true every day." "Amira," he said it flat, the way she used to say his name. "Not with me." She stared at the ceiling a long time. "I'm tired," she said finally. "Not sleepy tired. Tired of the joke. Tired of being okay, so nobody else has to feel bad about it. So don't be. Then what am I supposed to be?" "Scared, like I probably was, the whole time I was asleep. You never needed me to be brave. You just stayed." Amira pressed the back of her hand hard against her eyes. "I don't want to disappear," she said. "I never even beat you at that stupid puzzle. You're not allowed to." He grabbed her free hand. "You told me I wasn't allowed to give up when I couldn't even talk back. So now I'm telling you. Those are your rules. You made them. That's not fair, using my own rules on me. You started it." Down the hall, Taewon and Neka had stopped fighting in doorways. "I'm still not taking your money," Neka said one night, too tired to sound sharp about it. "I know. I mean it. I believe you." He looked at his hands. "I just don't know how to do nothing. Never learned it." "Neither did I," she said. "I just had more practice hiding it." Neither of them said anything else about it. But the next morning he was in the chair beside hers before either child woke up. The call came 11 days later. A possible donor, the doctor said. Not a perfect match. Real risk, and her heart's already weak. If we wait for something better, we may not get another chance. How dangerous? Neka asked. He didn't answer right away. Down the hall, an elephant book lay open on Amira's blanket, and she gripped Junho's hand tighter, like she already knew. They took Amira to surgery at 6 a.m., before the sun had fully committed to coming up, and Junho was not supposed to be awake to see it. He was anyway, standing at the end of the hallway in slippers that didn't match, watching them wheel her past with an oxygen mask over half her face and a Neka jogging alongside until the doors wouldn't let her go any farther. Amira caught his eye for exactly 1 second and lifted 2 fingers off the blanket, the same lazy wave she gave him every day at the end of a visit, like this was any regular Tuesday and she'd be back by 4:15. Then the doors closed, and it wasn't. The surgical waiting room had bad coffee, a television nobody watched, and 4 chairs that didn't match each other. Junho had spent his whole life in private waiting rooms with better furniture than this, and it took him exactly 1 hour to understand why Amira had never once complained about the room he'd been kept in. Neka paced. Junho had spent his whole life in private waiting rooms with better furniture than this, and got 3 different numbers. Sit, Taiwan said, after Neka's 20th lap. Don't. I wasn't going to tell you it'll be fine. Then what? That I know exactly how slow that clock moves. He nodded at the wall clock, its second hand crawling like it had somewhere better to be. I had 3 months of it. Neka sat. Junho didn't. He stood by the window with the elephant book pressed to his chest, the one Amira had called a textbook, and thought about how strange it was to finally understand, from this side of it, exactly what his father's face had looked like every day for 3 months, while he slept and knew nothing about any of it. She's going to make fun of this book when she wakes up, he said, to nobody. She better, Neka said. God, I hope she does. 4 hours. 6. A nurse came out once to say nothing was wrong. These things just took time, and left before anyone could ask a real question. You could rest, Taiwan said. Around hour 5. No, Junho. She didn't leave, he said, sharper than he meant, eyes still on the door. She came every day not knowing if I could hear a word of it. I'm not leaving this hallway. Taiwan sat down on the floor next to him instead of arguing, a billionaire on hospital tile because his son wouldn't take the chair, and when Neka finally noticed, she slid down and joined them without a word. At hour 7, a surgeon came through the doors, still damp at the collar, and everyone stood too fast. She's out. New heart's beating on its own. That's the best sign this early. Neka's knees went. Taiwan caught her arm, same as the hallway that started all this, except this time it wasn't bad news she was grabbing onto. Can we see her? Not yet. She'll be out for hours, but she's here. The surgeon almost smiled. She made it through the hard part. Junho sat back down, right where he'd been standing, and held the book against his chest, like it had done something. She was out for 2 full days before her eyes opened, and even then, it took her a moment to find him in the chair beside her bed. His chair, technically, the one she'd claimed weeks ago in a different room. You look terrible, she rasped. You look worse. Rude. I just had surgery. Her voice was thin, wrecked, barely holding a joke together, but she got it out anyway. Where's my book? He held it up. You called it a textbook. It is a textbook. Read it anyway. Badly. I missed how bad you are at voices, he read. He was still terrible at it. She still complained, though it came out slower now, more effort behind every word, and twice she had to stop and just breathe for a minute before letting him continue. You're doing the thing, he said, on one of those pauses. What thing? pretending you're fine when you're not. I just had my chest opened, Junho. I'm allowed a little pretending. I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to perform for me. You never made me perform for you. He set the book down. You told me, well, you told a version of me that couldn't answer, that being scared doesn't mean you stop living. I've been thinking about that a lot, sitting in that hallway. Amira looked at him for a long moment, some of the bravado sliding off her face. It's harder to believe it about yourself, she admitted. Easier to say it to somebody else. Then I'll say it to you until you believe it too. That's fair, right? You get a turn. She managed something close to her real smile. That's annoying. And also, okay, fine, deal. Recovery came slow and mean, worse some days than others. But every day at 4:15, his idea now, not hers. Junho was in the chair, reading badly, arguing about animals, keeping count of every joke that landed and every one that didn't. Amira got stronger, not fast, but steady. The machines beside her settling into a rhythm that stopped making Junho flinch every time he heard it, the way hers used to settle him back when their positions had been reversed. Neither of them said it out loud, but both of them understood exactly what had happened. She'd given him a reason to open his eyes once. Now he was giving her one to keep them open every day after. Amira went home 6 weeks after surgery, not before. 6 weeks of slow laps around the hospital corridor, holding Aneka's arm. 6 weeks of a nurse checking her incision and telling her every single time not to laugh too hard because it pulled at the stitches, advice Amira treated as a personal challenge rather than a warning. "You're doing it on purpose," the nurse said once, catching her mid-laugh at something Junho had said. "I can't control what's funny," Amira said. "That's a you problem, not a me problem." Discharge day, she wore actual clothes for the first time in months, instead of a hospital gown, and stood in the doorway of room 298 for a long second before leaving it, like she wanted to remember it exactly the way it looked. "You good?" Junho asked. He'd been discharged 2 weeks earlier and had come back just for this. "I'm great." She meant it, mostly. "Just weird. I've basically lived here. You're allowed to miss a hospital. That's a normal thing that happens to 0 people. But sure." "Shut up. I didn't say I'd miss it. I said it was weird." She grabbed his sleeve and pulled him toward the elevator before either of them could make it a bigger moment than it needed to be. The first month home was slower than Amira wanted, and exactly as slow as her doctors insisted on. Short walks, no running, a follow-up appointment every week where they checked the new heart like it might change its mind. Junho came over most days, mostly because Aneka's apartment was louder and better than the room he came home to. They watched bad television. They argued over card games. Amira always accused him of losing on purpose, which he never once admitted to, even when it was true. It was 2 months before her doctor cleared her for the park. Nothing wild, the doctor warned. A walk, maybe some grass, not a marathon. "Understood," Amira said, already planning the marathon. The park had a bench with a wobbly leg and a fountain that only half worked. Amira took one look at the open grass and broke into the closest thing to a run her doctor would have allowed, if her doctor had been there to see it, which he was not. "Amira, it's a light jog." "It is not a light jog. You are sprinting." "I'm 8. Sprinting is just walking with enthusiasm." She made it to the tree, out of breath but grinning, one hand pressed briefly to her chest, the way she used to before surgery, old habit, before catching herself and dropping it, because it didn't hurt this time. It just felt like breathing hard, nothing more. Junho caught up a second later, considerably more winded than a healthy 8-year-old had any right to be. "You're slow now," Amira said. "Comas'll do that. That was months ago. Still counts." Behind them, Neka spread a blanket under the shade and started unpacking a cooler like she was preparing for a small war. Bole wrapped in foil, fried fish, still warm, a container of pepper stew that could probably be smelled from the parking lot. Taewon eyed it with the caution of a man who'd eaten at the finest tables on 3 continents and clearly sensed, somehow, that none of it had prepared him for this. "What is that?" he asked, pointing at the sauce. "Don't," Neka said. "I wasn't going to. You were absolutely going to. I can see it on your face." She handed him a piece of fish anyway, small bite. He did not take a small bite. His eyes were watering within 4 seconds, his boardroom composure completely undone by a single piece of fried fish. "It's fine," he said, in the strained voice of a man very much not fine. "Just a kick." "You have never had spicier in your entire billionaire life," Amira said, delighted, jogging over. "Look at your face. I am simply adjusting. Drink water, not the juice," Neke warned. Too late, as Junho, trying to help, handed his father the wrong drink entirely, and orange juice did nothing whatsoever for Pepper. The children found this so funny, Amira had to sit down. "The most powerful man in Korea," she wheezed, "losing to fish." "I am not losing. You're crying, sir. These are not tears. Those are tears," Junho confirmed, and for once didn't bother hiding how much he enjoyed saying it. It became a Sunday thing without anyone deciding it should. Neka brought food. Taewon kept trying the pepper sauce every week like it owed him a rematch, and lost every time. Amira's laps around the tree got longer, week by week, until a light jog was almost true. It was Amira who noticed the adults first. Of course it was. "They keep sitting close," she told Junho. Watching the Neka and Taewon deep in conversation, neither seemed to want to end. "They're friends. Friends don't sit that close." And she laughed at his joke yesterday. It wasn't even funny. "I was there. My father does not make jokes." "Exactly. He made one. It was bad. And she laughed anyway." Amira grabbed his arm. "Junho, I think our parents like each other. She's not my... You know what I mean. We have to say something. We are 8. Perfect age for it. Nobody expects it from us." It took a week and 4 badly hidden comments to crack it open. "Neka," Amira said, all fake innocence. "Do you think Mr. Kang is handsome? For a school report. You don't have a report." "I could have a report." Across the blanket, Junho was equally unsubtle. "You smiled 4 times today, father. Usually it's 2, if the market's good." "I don't count my smiles." "I do. It's Neka. You memorized her coffee order. You should just tell her." Taewon opened his mouth and, for once, had nothing. Nobody admitted anything that Sunday. But the coffee kept arriving, exactly right, every morning after, and Neka started bringing enough food for a family that hadn't officially called itself one yet. Amira noticed that too. She noticed everything. She sat under the tree that evening, tired in the good way now, Junho beside her. "Hey," she said. "What?" "Nothing. Just, I like this." She bumped his shoulder with hers. "All of it." Junho looked at her the way he used to look at her chair by his hospital bed, like it was something he still couldn't quite believe was his. "Me too," he said, and pulled her up to race him to the tree one more time before it got dark. If this story got you, if you felt it in your chest when Amira waved with 2 fingers before those doors closed, Do me a favor and hit that like button right now. It costs you nothing, and it tells me you want more stories like this one. Subscribe if you're not already, because this channel is full of stories exactly like Amira and Junho's. The ones that make you cry in the car, make you call your mom, make you hug your kids a little tighter tonight. Drop a comment and tell me, what part got you? Was it the fox book? The two-finger wave? The pepper sauce? I read every single one. And if you know somebody who needs a good cry today, send them this video. Talk to you in the next story.